Welcome to eTeacher Pakistan webinar series. The eTeacher Pakistan webinar series is an initiative under the eTeacher Plus for Pakistan program. The eTeacher program is fully funded by the Regional English Language Office at the US Embassy Islamabad that provides professional development opportunities to English language teachers and learners across the country. These opportunities are provided through global online courses, massive open online courses, webinar series, and then engaging the alumni into several alumni engagement activities. If you wish to stay updated about the eTeacher programming in Pakistan, please follow Relo Pakistan on Facebook, and you can also subscribe to their YouTube channel. Today, as a part of eTeacher Pakistan webinar series 3.2, we will be talking about meeting the educational expectations of Generation Z. To present on this topic, we have with us today Kaukab Abid. Kaukab holds an MBA English from University of Karachi and MBA Marketing from Institute of Business Management. Currently, he is associated with Barrett Hodgson University in Karachi, where he is a senior lecturer. He has over 10 research articles being published in international journals. He has presented his research in several national and 2 international conferences held in Italy and Nepal. His journey with the eTeacher program started in 2017 when he completed assessment technique course funded by Relo Pakistan, which further provided him an opportunity to present at the NELTA conference. In addition to that, he was also one of the presenters at the eTeacher Alumni Conference held in Islamabad in 2018. In addition to that, he also completed TESOL Advanced Practitioner course sponsored by Relo Pakistan. So without any delay, let's welcome Kaukab for this webinar.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much for this introduction, and I'm really excited to be a part of this webinar series. The topic today for my presentation is meeting the educational expectations of Generation Z. So this webinar will enable the participants to understand what makes Generation Z so different, identify the educational expectations of Generation Z, and developing an understanding of how to meet their expectations. And for that, you'll learn some practical tips, tools, and techniques that can be used to achieve the intended learning objectives in the language classes. So what separates Generation Y from X, and is Generation Z a real thing? How old is each generation? Are they really that different? It's easy to see why there's so much confusion about the generational cohorts. So let's look at the baby boomers first. Baby boomers emerged after the end of World War II, when birth rates across the world spiked. The explosion of the new infants became known as the baby boom. The baby boomer generation makes up a substantial portion of the world's population. Today, baby boomers are reaching their retirement age. Then came Generation X or Gen X. This refers to the generation that were born between the mid-1960s and the early 1980s. They fall between the baby boomers and the millennials. And members of this group are approaching the middle of their working careers and potential peak earning years. This is the term that most people recognize the most, millennials. They are born between 1980s to the mid-1990s. So many young adults nowadays would define themselves as millennials. This generation was born in between the technology revolution. And then came Generation Z. There's a slight overlap between Generation Z and millennials, as Generation Z are said to be born between the mid-1990s and to the early 2000s and mid 2000s. They are mainly the children of Generation X, but could have parents that are millennials. As they have had the internet from a young age, Generation Z tend to be knowledgeable of technology and social media. Who am I? I am a millennial, and it's important to know that because I believe that if millennials cannot understand Generation Z, then no one can. I've been teaching at the university level. I started teaching almost 5 years back, and I started teaching with the graduate students first. So those students were mostly millennials. But now all my students belong to the Generation Z cohort. And I've observed a great deal of change when it comes to the behavior, learning styles, and approach towards the education. The way Generation X, the millennials, um, had an attitude towards education is not the same for Generation Z. Now the question arises, why is Generation Z so different? As I mentioned, that Generation Z was born from 1995 to 2010. They were shaped in the era that society started looking at screens more than faces. Um, this generation is also known as the net generation, screenagers, generation connected, Google generation, digital natives, the dot-com kids. So many of the names given to this generation highlight the impact of the digital era in their on their formative years. So not only is the technology globally accessible, but we as humans are significantly outnumbered by technologies. Today, there are almost 50 billion connected devices on this planet. That is almost 7 times larger than the number of people. This generation of children and teenagers, they'll comprise of almost 1/3 of the workforce within a decade. So smartphones, social media, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. Generation Z is the first to be born into a time when that technology existed. They are the first digital natives. They were born into a world of vast technological advances and innovations. They are unlike other generations, like the millennials like me, who either grew up without the technology or came into adulthood during the rise of social media, smartphones, and instant accessibility of information. Generation Z is finding the world of advanced technology and constant connectivity both helpful and harmful. Now, the question arises, what makes Generation Z different? So, there are five uh, factors that define Generation Z. Let's look at each of the factor individually. The first one is social. Generation Z are social in nature. If social media sites were countries, Facebook would be the largest country with over 2.7 billion users of Facebook, followed by China, of course. However, strangely, they are unable to channelize their need for social connection in the real world. They're always on the move. They have a short attention span and they're more likely to get bored easily and quickly. This is one thing that we all language teachers have to face in our classrooms. They can easily get distracted and they are unable to concentrate on one thing for a long period of time because they are always on the move. They're impatient. Generation Z are the first truly global generation. The celebrities, movies, music, they have always been global, but through other communication patterns, fashion, social trends, um, they are also globally connected now. That's what makes them a truly global generation. Uh, Digital change is constant, and there have been periods in the history um, of intensive change, but unlike the industrial revolution or the agricultural revolution, this digital revolution has no boundaries. Half of the world now is using a smartphone, and almost 75% have access to a mobile device. And what's more is that emerging economies are adopting technologies even faster than the developed countries. And so is the case with Pakistan. It's a visual generation too. They are more likely to watch than read. They also have a visual memory. That is one of the reasons that teachers might now need to change their teaching pedagogies and include the visual contents in their lesson plans. Now the question arises, what do they expect and how to meet their expectations? Um, we all came across a number of unfortunate instances during the shift to online education due to the coronavirus situation. Disrespectful behavior of students and lack of appreciation on the part of the college or the university administration is not only frustrating for the teachers, but it led many of us to question our decision of choosing teaching as a profession. However, if we dig deeper, we'll get to know that the students had an entirely different set of expectations which were not met during this period. Now, the question arises, what do they expect? They feel more stress about the issues than the other generations. They're also more likely to have direct mental and physical health problems as a result of these stressful situations. These kind of stressors have had a direct impact on the mental health of Generation Z. Due to all the chronic stress that Generation Z feels, they're seeing increasing level of stress and depression. The pressures associated with social media have made Generation Z additionally stressed, and that the pressures directly tie into their mental health issues. Now, they expect the teachers to be more considerate. They need someone who they can talk to without facing the fear of being judged. We as teachers, we need to make an effort on establishing a meaningful connection with them. We can also help them in learning the art of developing relationships with their friends, with their parents, with their peers, and their teachers as well. We have talked a lot about technology, and the importance of YouTube and other mobile applications, educational applications cannot be overstated. Um, Generation Z prefers technology, learning through technology, and technology is since it is a part of their life, they want the teachers to use technology um, um, as part of educational, instructional tools, and as well as feedback mechanisms. So they want some, one way or the other, they want technology to be a part of their curriculum. This is also the app generation, and even in education, there are many mobile applications that can be used by the teachers to get the students engaged in their learning. Um, and most of the Generation Z, they believe that using technology in the classrooms can enhance their learning experience. Then Generation Z is more protective about their personal space. They do not want teachers to intrude in their personal lives until and unless they want them to. In addition to the physical, to the personal, in addition to the personal space, they do not want to confine the learning to the physical space of a classroom. If anything, the physical setting of the classroom, it's a turn off for them. So we as teachers, we need to redefine the learning space. Um, we, I touched upon the shorter attention span, and students, they have a very short attention span, and they can concentrate about on one topic or one instruction for not more than 10 minutes, uh, specifically when it comes to sitting on a chair and listening to instruction. So any lecture that lasts long than 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, then it is sure to end with students missing a chunk of information. While there are plenty of strategies for maintaining student attention, this includes removing distractions, providing movement breaks, but one of the most critical strategies for improving student attention is to break up instruction into smaller periods of time. And with our classroom timings of, let's say, 90 minutes, and in some of our undergraduate and graduate programs, there are 3-hour classes as well. It's almost impossible to have their attention. So eventually, the learning objectives will not be met. Then they this generation is quite impatient. This generation has developed a tendency to demand instant feedback. They have this short term orientation which makes them impatient. So, when teachers take time in giving them a detailed feedback, they often lose interest. So, they expect the teachers to be far more responsive than they were previously. So what are the tools and techniques that can help language teachers? The first one is digital connections. You can use educational softwares. There are a lot of tech tools that can make your job easier, as well as keep Generation Z engaged. In addition to the full service LMS system, learning management systems, you can leverage software to create everything from interactive presentations to educational games. Generation Z is the first generation that doesn't know life without technology. To this population, Google, Instagram, smartphones, they're not just conventional tools. They're a necessary part of their life. Generation Z expects to be connected to the world and be able to access information at any time. And this translates to education as well. So when we take away their mobile phones in the classroom, um, they get uncomfortable. That's not what they want. As I said, Generation Z wants immediate feedback on assignments, just as they do on social media. They also crave autonomy in their education. And with these learning management systems and providing digital connections, um, they feel that comfort level in the classrooms. So students want to make decisions about what they learn and how they demonstrate their knowledge. The modern trend of digitizing education is getting really overwhelming for teachers. And modern classes, they look nothing like they did half a century ago. Smart applications, virtual reality, these technologies have completely transformed education globally. As far as Pakistan is concerned, yes, I know that uh, not many of such technologies are available here, but we are getting there. Um, so the educational innovations will soon reshape the learning in a new way. And we as teachers, we as language teachers, we must be ahead of the curve, and um, we must be the ones that bring that innovation to our educational institutes. I know it's most of us we do not have that much budgets for purchasing, let's say, a virtual reality uh, VR glasses in our classrooms, but most of these tools, for example, using Google Classroom is free. Microsoft Teams does not require a lot, um, and we can also use social media as part of our um, educational plan or course scheme. So we can all do that for free. Uh, we also need to set up tech-friendly classrooms. By tech-friendly classrooms, I mean that we need to work on the layouts, the traditional teacher-centered approach. The classrooms that we have at the moment, they were designed on the traditional teacher-centered approach, when the teacher was standing in front of the class and everyone was sitting, and they were expecting the teacher to deliver the instructions. And the students no longer feel comfortable in that position. We need to have a different layout in which the chairs, um, the desk, even the classroom board, that needs to be shifted in different manner. Then comes the concept of blended learning, and so blended learning refers to a course of study in which parts are delivered by the teacher in the traditional classroom, while other parts are undertaken by the learner independently of the teacher. So the independent study is delivered online, and if you can get both elements right, blended learning plays perfectly to the strengths of Generation Z. It develops their autonomous learning skills and encourages the learners to spend more time on tasks, both of which have a, a, a big impact on learner outcomes. One of the key success is getting the online learning environment right. As digital natives, Generation Z are demanding, um, they are quite demanding when it comes to technology. Their brains are wired for fast delivery of content and data, and they expect interactive digital media that appeals to their interest and is matched to their abilities as well. So when we are talking about blended learning and creating an online environment, the learning, if it does not reflect the everyday experiences, there's a risk that they will switch off and they reject what's on offer. That's what happened during and post coronavirus situation. The digital natives didn't like the way we were teaching, and I'm talking about we as we as a whole. We were unable to fulfill their expectations because they didn't feel connected to the technologies that we were using. We were still taking 3 hour classes. That's not what they wanted. They wanted a blended learning approach. They wanted us to give short lectures, probably some reading materials, but we had to follow the protocols given to us by the administration, by the university or the college administration, and that didn't work out quite well. Another critical element when we talk about blended learning and the success of blended learning is that the content done independently by the student online is tied directly to the content that is delivered in the classroom. So there has to be a connection between the two. We need to plan out which lessons are which lessons can be conducted online and which can be conducted offline, which can be conducted in a better way. So we need to have that plan of things ahead of time, and it should be communicated to the students as well. What it does the most is that it plays to different learning styles. So blended learning caters to a variety of learning styles, and they expose students to a greater variety of task types. It also extends the study time. Blended learning, if it is organized and delivered in an engaging way, then it can extend the amount of time students spend on learning. Um, it also increases the level of engagement and it empowers the students. So these are all the benefits of blended learning that every teacher within the current scenario, there is always a possibility of another lockdown. There's always a possibility of another announcement of closure of schools. So what we have to think something different now. Then there are many applications that allow us to give instant feedback. This instant feedback can be given through, let's say, Grammarly. So if you have a writing task, and you need to purchase the Grammarly's the licensed version as well. If you cannot, then the free version can also work. So if there's a writing task, you can use Grammarly and give feedback instantly. So they don't have to wait for a long duration of time. You can set quizzes on Kahoot or Quizlet. I know most of us operate in large classrooms, and giving instant feedback is not possible because of the lack of resources and time. So these apps, they give feedback instantly and automatically. So it reduces these apps reduce a lot of the time that we spend on the assessments. It's auto-generated. The reports can be saved and retrieved for later use. So this caters to the need of the students of getting instant feedback. Now, what I've done is I have matched these expectations with the tools and techniques. So remember, we talked about 5 different expectations of students. They wanted us to be considerate. That can be done through digital connections. If we are available and accessible to them, not 24/7, but we must be digitally available for them because they feel more comfortable in discussing their issues digitally as well. So it's up to them. If they want to come to me in my counseling hours, they are most welcome. But if they want some advice on WhatsApp or any other Google Classroom, I'm there for them. Then we talked about their need for technology that can be catered through digital connections, making tech-friendly classrooms with gadgets, blended learning, and using mobile applications or other computer educational applications for giving them instant feedback. Then the problem of their time, the shorter attention span. If we make tech-friendly classrooms, um, not only will they utilize the classroom time in a much better way, but through blended learning, they can take some learning outside the classroom and learn some more. As I said earlier, that through blended learning, you actually increase the level of engagement as well as the time students are spending on the subject. So similarly, space. Um, the classroom, the traditional classroom environment for Generation Z is quite a turn off. So blended learning and tech-friendly classrooms allow them to feel more comfortable with the learning environment, and they tend to be more um, engaged in such spaces. And then their need for instant feedback. Mobile applications, blended learning, these all can be used to give instant feedback, and that all caters to their expectations. So this is how I have matched their expectations with the tools and techniques that we all can practice in our language classrooms. In the end, I would just like to conclude by stating that Generation Z is not the most hardworking generation, but they are surely the most talented generation of all time. So we as teachers, we have the responsibility to make the most out of the enormous talent that they have. I hope this presentation would have helped you, and um, thank you for providing me this opportunity to conduct this webinar on a topic that is very close to my heart. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaukab, for such a valuable session. We as educators really need to understand the Generation Z so that we can teach them the way they want to be taught. If you have comments, questions, and or suggestions, please feel free to write us on eteacher@evolution.com.pk. If you are alumni of the eTeacher program and wish to present in this webinar series, please write us on the same email address showing your interest and the topic you would like to present on. Until then, we wish you happy teaching and happy learning.